Hello, this is Keith George, and I'm going to walk you through the process for submitting a lesson plan to the Alabama Learning Exchange, or ALEX website. I am at the ALEX homepage right now, and I'm going to first click on my personal workspace. And as you can see, I'm already logged in. I know that because I've got a welcome message personalized to me. So the first thing I'm going to do to create a lesson plan is simply click on the Create Lesson Plan button. And that's going to open the lesson plan template. Now, there's a couple of things up here at the top to point out to you. There's a reminder that anything that's marked with an asterisk is required. And then there's also the link to the lesson plan criteria checklist. This is the checklist that the evaluators or reviewers will use to evaluate your lesson for approval. You certainly want to take a look at that before you prepare your lesson. And then there's also a RTF or word processing format of the lesson plan template that you can open, work inside your word processor, and then transfer the data to the online lesson plan submission form. But let's go ahead and look through the areas of the form at the very top, and then also in about midway down, and then finally at the bottom. You have a set of 3 buttons in each place. You have Save Changes and Continue Working. That's just something you want to do as you work through so that you don't lose data. Exit Without Saving is when you realize you've made a mistake, you're not going to complete this plan, maybe you inadvertently opened the wrong plan and you want to go back to how it was, you can exit without saving. Or if you're done working on it for the day, you can save changes and exit. It is important to point out that the lesson plan does not have to be created in one single sitting. So you can go back and edit a plan all the way up until when you submit the plan. So let's look at each of the fields. The first field here is for the title. This is simply where we would enter the title of our lesson. Now, I'm going to have another video for you that talks about the various formatting options and things like that. So we're just going to have that as plain text right now. One thing to remember about the title is that you do want it to be catchy and engaging, because that will be something that will attract other users to your plan. But you also want to make sure that it is concise and gives a good idea of what will be included. The next section is the overview or annotation. And this, as you see, is a 3 to 5 sentence description of the lesson. It can be a little bit longer than that. One thing you do want to remember is that when users are searching for lessons, the only 2 areas they will see are the title and the overview. So you do want to make sure that your overview, again, is engaging and will attract the attention of the users. You also want to make sure that it is descriptive. If there are any important key terms that will be addressed in the lesson, make sure that you use those terms in here. So if you're wanting to create a math lesson regarding fractions, you will want to make sure that fractions is in the description, but you may also want to include the words numerator and denominator, as these are where the search engine for ALEX will look to identify those key terms. So now that you've got your overview entered, it's time to align our lesson to our content standards. Now, the way you do this is simply when you have your lesson ready, you click the Search for Standards button. A new window will pop up that will allow you to select the courses of study that are applicable. We'll go with social studies, and we'll say this is a 7th grade lesson. And I hope you notice that when I add 7th grade, because there are 2 courses available for 7th grade social studies, those sub-courses now show up. You would see the same thing if you selected a high school course, because there are different high school courses that are available. But sometimes if you're just, for instance, selecting 2nd grade, there's only one social studies course for 2nd grade, so we know which course you're talking about. But we will do 7th grade, and we'll say geography. And now let's just display the results. And that's going to show us all of the standards for 7th grade geography, and you get the full standard, any bullets, examples, all of that related to the STEM. And when you find the standards that you are addressing in this lesson, simply check the box next to Associate Standard, and notice that you can obviously select more than one. Once you have all of them selected that you need, click Save Associated Standards, and notice it takes us back to the form, but now those standards have been added for us. If you mistakenly add one, there is a way to delete a standard from a lesson. One thing to remember about content standards and your lesson, remember that it's more about quality than quantity. While there is no magic number for how many standards a lesson plan should be aligned to, it does play a part in the review process. If you have, for instance, 10 standards, and a little bit farther down the page here, you're going to identify how long your lesson is. If you've got 10 standards in a 30-minute lesson, 30 to 60-minute lesson, that's going to be very difficult for the reviewers to understand that you're fully addressing those standards in such a short period of time. You also want to remember that standards can be cross-curricular. Even though this is a social studies lesson for geography, maybe I'm using latitude and longitude, so there might be some math standards that apply as well. And I just took that off the top of my head, so I'm not sure if there are, but let's just imagine that this standard was related to that. And again, at the top or the bottom, I can click Save Associated Standards, and notice that it has a math standard as well as the social studies standards. So don't be afraid to go cross-curricular in your lesson. Just be sure that all of the standards that you include are addressed by the plan. National or other standards, notice that this one is optional. You can include next generation science standards if there are particular Common Core elements that you want to include that aren't articulated in the College and Career Ready standards. If they want to include the social studies standards such as Geography for Life from the National Geographic Alliance, something like that, you can add those there. Notice no asterisks, so that is an optional field. Your primary learning objective, this is an area for you to put your PLOs. Sometimes teachers will actually use this area for your big questions or your essential question. This is a great place to put that. Anything that is directed at the students that is your primary learning objective or a similar item. You see that we have our save buttons here. This is probably a good time if you've actually been completing this to go ahead and click save so that you don't lose anything. The next field is another optional one for any additional learning objectives. Some systems have individual requirements for teachers to add, so we have a field for you to do any other kind of learning objectives. This is actually an area where many teachers include I can statements or things like that. I showed you the total duration field a little bit earlier. This is where you select the length of your lesson. Now remember that a lesson could cover multiple days, and you would simply select greater than 120 minutes. But most of the lessons are going to be somewhere between 0 and 2 hours. Materials and equipment. This is everything that the teacher or students would need, along with any information regarding that, to include in the plan so that it is available for teachers and students. Now do notice that it reminds you here, and you can see the next field is technology resources needed. So in materials and equipment, we're simply going to list things that we need that are not technology related. So for instance, we may need colored paper, 3 sheets per student. We may need markers. We may need graph paper. So anything that the teacher or the students will need ahead of time, you want to list that in materials. And that's very similar to technology resources needed. Maybe they are going to do an internet activity, so they need internet access. They need a computer or other device with, let's say, word processing, and maybe the teacher also needs an interactive whiteboard. So you can see you can put not just the items, but a little bit of a guide here in the technology resources needed. Next up is background and preparation. These are things that the teacher needs to do in advance. This also would include background information that the students might need. So for instance, you might have teacher prep, ensure all apps are loaded on devices. Student background. This lesson should follow previous work on latitude and longitude. And what you're doing here is you're basically letting the teacher know that in order to complete this lesson, they should already know what latitude and longitude are, so that there is non-instructional time wasted for a teacher finding this lesson only to realize that that previous background material has not been covered. Overall, throughout the whole lesson planning process, keep that first year teacher in mind that might be looking at your plan. Make sure that you include everything that might need to be included to help them be successful. As teachers, we take a lot of things for granted, so it is important for us to always remember that we were once first-year teachers as well, and we would have really appreciated extra time by a mentor teacher to share all the little details. So that's what we want you to do in an ALEKS lesson plan. Okay, that brings us to the big part, procedures and activities. A clear, succinct description of the activity may be divided into steps or sections. If distinctly different materials, resources, or web links are used in different portions, place these into steps or sections. So what we're looking for here are step-by-step activities that would happen for the completion of the lesson. And this is a good time for us to number our lessons, our steps. So our very first step may be have students complete bell ringer that is on the board. Now, if you put that instruction down as a step, you're also going to want to put what the actual bell ringer is. So for instance, our bell ringer for this geography activity might be, how can sailors determine where they are when no land is in sight? So that might be our bell ringer question to get students to work on as we're preparing our lesson. So then our next step might be, teacher will present latitude and longitude presentation using interactive whiteboard. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a note out here in parentheses that says see attached, because if you're doing an ALEKS lesson plan and you talk about any resource, you need to include that resources, and it's the very next step to upload or view attachments. If you talk about a presentation, you should include the presentation. If you talk about a handout, you should include the handout. It may be that you need to link to it, which we will have a short little video on creating links to show you how to do that. But if you talk about it in your procedures or activities or anywhere in the plan, you should make sure to include that. It's very frustrating for a teacher to find a lesson on ALEKS only to have it require a resource that they don't have. So we're going to go on and we'll talk about uploading a few attachments now. So let's say if we had that presentation we were looking for, click here to upload, and you see it's going to go to fairly familiar looking. Anybody that's done an email attachment should be able to figure this out. We're going to click choose a file. We're going to go on our computer to wherever that presentation was. So we'll go to documents for me, and surely there's a presentation here somewhere just to use as a demo. You know what? We'll use a PDF. Your file formats can be any type of the major Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF, MP3, MP4 for videos and music, things like that. You're just going to click upload then, and you're going to know that it's complete when you see it in blue, that it's linked here, and then you can close the window. And notice that when you return, you still just see the click to upload. Don't worry, if you click it again to see it, it's still there, but it doesn't display all the individual files in the edit mode. Now, the next section is assessment strategies. For assessment strategies, you're going to include all of your assessments, formative and summative, that you have referred to in the plan. So if you talk about the students taking a quiz, then you should include the quiz here, either as let's see, students will complete formative quiz after presentation. So maybe you're going to have them take a short little quiz after you've completed the presentation, just to ensure that they paid attention and to make sure everybody's on the same page. So what you would want to do then is you would want to see attached and have the entire quiz, if that's what you had done, or you could do see attached for sample questions, because again, that first year teacher may not be on the same line of thinking that you are and may not fully understand what you're questioning the kids about. You may also have something like students will complete a online quiz using Kahoot. Now, if we were doing this for something that is online, we would then want to create a link. And again, we'll have a video on creating links. But you also need to remember that if you link to something, it needs to be a link that is publicly accessible. So sometimes when you use web services like Google Docs or Kahoot or anything like that that requires you to have an account, you do need to make sure that your settings are correct on the online service so that all teachers can view that resource. So for instance, with Google Docs, you need to make sure that it was shared publicly, things like that. Next up is extension. Notice that it is optional, but highly recommended that you include some sort of a enrichment or extension activity for students that may already have mastered those objectives. So for instance, students that are students that demonstrate mastery of latitude and longitude can create a treasure map using coordinates for other students to follow. So some sort of an enrichment activity for these students to work on so that they're not sitting idly. Remediation is the last section, and that is simply what can be done for students who need extra help. This could be things like online video that recovers the topic. This could be online drill and practice type games. Again, you would include the links and make sure that these are accessible to everyone. Now, once you have all of the areas complete, and obviously this is nowhere near complete, as for instance, the procedures and activities are certainly going to be much more in-depth than what I've got. But once you've got everything done, you're going to save or exit, which will save and exit your changes. And that will take you back to your personal workspace. But now if we look in your current plans section, you will see that here is the title of our lesson plan. And if I go to view, this will show it to me in the view that visitors to ALEKS would see. And so among other things, you can see that my attached document shows up as a link now that they can do. And all of my data is there. My standards are in place, everything like that. So now we have our lesson plan created, and we can find it in current plans. And as I mentioned, if we go back and do edit, we can come back and work on this plan some more. So if we needed to add our primary learning objective, we could go back and add that now. Remember that once you exit, you have not submitted it to ALEKS. There's another training video on the submission process that you can check out when you're ready to submit. But this has just been a short overview of the lesson plan creation process for ALEKS website, for the ALEKS website on submitting a lesson plan to ALEKS. Remember, if you have any questions, you need any help, use the Contact Us link at the bottom and just let us give you a hand with that. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing your submission, and good luck on your lesson plan. Thank you very much.